Is this thing on? Ooh, much better. Welcome back, you're tuned in to WRPG Radio, the only place this side of the cosmic divide that promises to take you for a ride. We're fresh off a small break with plenty of new and exciting things to talk about, and this video is going to dangle that proverbial bait while I take full advantage of the enormous rusty hook. Consider this your way station of endless possibilities, a peek, so to speak, into other worlds of exciting intrigue, breathtaking beauty, and so much forbidden knowledge that your friends and family may start eyeing you suspiciously at gatherings. This broadcast does contain, but is not limited to, action RPGs such as your Grimdawns, your Last Epochs, and your Diablo 4s. We've also got roguelites with a capital T, even if it's a little weird in the middle of the word like that, with brilliant examples such as Skull the Hero Slayer, Rogue Legacy 2, and BlazBlue Entropy Effect. Not to be outdone, we have the incredibly popular third-person action adventures. You'll get familiar with the storied travels of the Monster Hunter universe, the gloomy discoveries of Wayfinder, and in the distant, but not too distant future of the 41st millennium, this broadcast will be home to the mountains of Tyrannid corpses in Space Marine 2. That's all in the future though, so today is all about getting to know our gigantic gallery of games so you can get just as excited as me. I've broken the video up into handy little chunks of easily digestible information that you can skip around to your heart's content. The first of these is a broadcast favorite for most of you, I'm sure. I do have some bad news though, because all of the anticipation that's been building up for the next expansion of Grim Dawn has been completely stamped out, since it won't be releasing until 2025. That's right, the developers decided to push back the release of the game to give us quote-unquote more cool stuff, and to make the experience better for the players, and clearly ignoring my need for instant gratification as I sizzle among the bright hot stars of the Milky Way. Flip me over, I've been grilled to perfection. Sarcasm aside though, the game is building on a huge number of new systems, each with its own complexity and downright madness just bursting from the seams. I won't be talking much about those systems until we get an official release date, but I do recognize that there is a lot of room to spice up some of the outdated Grim Dawn tutorial videos on this channel. Consider it a countdown to brand new systems that we'll get next year, and the best way to prepare yourself for all the eldritch abominations just waiting to tear their way
onto your stream.
I have a few more builds to share as well before we get a new class, and at that point I will have actually completed a full build for every single class in the game. So stay dialed in to get your hands on one of each if you're all about the Ash Ketchum life. If you're one of those die-hard Grim Dawners out there, I would highly recommend checking out the blog post that the developers update every once in a while on Steam. They provide a lot of high-level goodies of what's to come, and that way you can start revving up your dopamine receptors to get your creative juices flowing. Creativity.
Delicious.
For us here at WRPG though, you'll see some reinvigorated tutorial videos for all of the game's systems. We'll start with small things though, like the campaign, questing, and gear slots, and roll all the way up to nemesis bosses, legendary sets, and all of those secret celestials that everyone loves to swoon over. We also can't forget all of the class discussions in between, since we'll have a brand new one coming next year in the form of the Berserker. The Berserker will obviously fuse with each of the other classes to give us 9 more combinations, not to mention a microcosm of ways to play each of those combinations with new items, set pieces, and new endgame systems. All that being said, our next video will be a shiny new introduction to the game for anyone coming in fresh off the asteroid belt. And who knows, maybe 1 or 2 of those crusty old veterans will be pleasantly surprised as well. I will temper my expectations. But if Grimdawn is the kindly elder who's seen it all, then we also have to mention the persnickety upstart ignoring all the rules and running directly toward the gaping black expanse in search of adventure. I am, of course, talking about Last Epoch. If you're not familiar with Last Epoch, it just hit full release earlier this year and has entered its first season as of July. This game is what happens when a group of action RPG enthusiasts get together to make a video game and actually respond to their community's suggestions and requests, all while building on a foundation of incredibly strong fundamental understanding of the genre. The Last Epoch has easily taken the complexity of games like Path of Exile and condensed that into an experience that is beautifully approachable while remaining dense enough to give players the type of creative freedom that we all truly crave from this genre of game. Now, when I say dense, I want you to think of a black hole. If you're unfamiliar with how black holes work, well, maybe we can schedule a class trip sometime. For the purposes of this broadcast, however, just imagine a tennis ball with the mass of the Earth, and you've got a fair comparison for Last Epoch. To begin with, you've got 5 classes: your Sentinel, your Rogue, your Mage, Acolyte, and Primalist. Within each of those classes, you'll put your experience into passive points that are going to buff your character just like any other RPG. However, after you hit level 20, you'll be able to unlock one of 3 specializations for all 5 of those classes. As an example, the Sentinel can become a Forge Guard, a Void Knight, or a Paladin. Each specialization comes with its own abilities and passives that you can opt to use over your basic class abilities. The passives within your specialization will work in tandem with the passives that you've already chosen for your base class, and you can continue to put points into the base class if you weren't ready to upgrade it just yet. Not only that, but as you level, your abilities will gain their own experience as well. Each ability that you decide to specialize in will gain experience, which you can use to level different branches and different passives for a specific skill. Some of these passives may result in simply more damage or lower cooldowns, but others drastically alter the way that the ability does damage. You may have an ability that does physical and bleed damage, but decide to level a conversion into fire and ignite chance instead. The more you level up in Last Epoch, you'll complete quests just like you would in any action RPG, but you don't have to complete the campaign in order to start taking on some of the endgame systems. It might not be recommended, but who am I to argue with the corpse of someone whose catchphrase was, "I just wanted to see what would happen." There are a lot of things to talk about when it comes to Last Epoch, and I intend to explore the extreme depths of that void-soaked behemoth one step at a time. You'll see content very similar to what we do with Grim Dawn, including build guides, system tutorials, and class breakdowns, just to name a few. And we can't really call ourselves an action RPG broadcast if we don't mention the big, angry, demonic elephant in the room. I do have a bit of Season 4 Barbarian content lined up for this game, but with the expansion just on the horizon at the tail end of 2024, there is quite a bit to look forward to. With that being said, Diablo 4 does ultimately change on a 3 to 4 month rotation, which is a lot faster than most other action RPGs in this space, with the exception of the one that I really don't play much, being Path of Exile. With these changes, however, it becomes a little bit more difficult to really dedicate a ton of time and focus to Diablo 4, so you'll see a lot of build guides on the Eternal Realm dealing with seasonal changes and how it relates to a casual player, rather than chasing down those optimal farming routes and getting onto the top 100 leaderboards for that game. Diablo 4 does, however, have plenty of depths for us to plumb in the meantime, and plenty of creativity in all of its builds for all of its classes. Things are going to be very exciting over the next year, and even couple months before then, so stay tuned for more content on the granddaddy of them all. Just by mentioning those 3 games, I'm sure you can tell that we're all about the eye in the sky angle here. Seeing our little protagonists run around vanquishing their foes with the heavenly zeal that only comes with being the main character. But what if I told you that we could get all the same righteous fervor from even closer? What if we could expand our all-seeing eye to just above the shoulder where all the real carnage is? Turns out that's not very difficult with a game like Monster Hunter World. I can already hear all of the groans and, well, I guess, no I can't, because everybody loves Monster Hunter. If you've never played Monster Hunter, then you might not know just how similar it is to a lot of contemporary action RPGs. There are quests, there is gear, there are bosses, but each of these things operate in a way completely divergent to the cookie-cutter formula we see in most of the genre. When I say bosses, I mean that 100% of your time in Monster Hunter World will be spent fighting some degree of boss-level difficulty. Monsters are, in every right, their own characters with their own fan bases and their own personalities. Even the earliest monsters in the game provide a manner of challenge that you won't see in any isometric action RPG. With Monster Hunter Wilds releasing in 2025 as well, there is no better time to get into the Monster Hunter universe. Getting acclimated to one of the most unique RPG experiences is a lot easier if you have some idea of how the game works, but if you've ever fought a big angry bad guy more than a few times in any game, you really know what to expect. Preparation is a big deal in Monster Hunter, and while your character itself might not change, your gear will drastically alter how you approach a fight. The most important gear you'll ever upgrade, however, is your weapon. What you might not be prepared for is just how important your weapon will be deciding your builds, your playstyle, and the entirety of your personality in playing Monster Hunter. Do you like bobbing, weaving, and rolling over other monsters like Sonic the Hedgehog? That's a Dual Blades for you. Please don't spill your energy drink on your keyboard. Maybe you just want to be the tankiest frontliner that's ever absorbed a hit way larger than the entirety of your whole body. That would make you one of the cool guys in the Gun Lance Club, which is a shield and a lance with a veritable bazooka attached to it. There's also a weapon for all the bard players out there. The hunting horn is basically an offensive bagpipe that buffs your teammates and yourself for getting all kinds of unfair advantages that you definitely don't deserve for bullying all those poor defenseless monsters. There is a ton of other weapons to choose from with their own playstyle, so experiment until you fall in love. It's like college all over again. Every time a new Monster Hunter is released, Capcom will generally support it with content updates and patches until the next Monster Hunter is released. So endgame content is very challenging, very rewarding, and very repeatable. And there are even more new monsters to tango with once you've taken down the quote-unquote big boss of the game. Pinnacle content in Monster Hunter will challenge your build, your patience, and the absolute highest levels of your skill at the game. When it comes to this broadcast, we'll be deep diving into monster fights, system tutorials, and build crafting because Monster Hunter World is a massive repository of knowledge, all for the sake of smacking the biggest, baddest dragons alive. Everyone knows that there's no better feeling on this plane of existence than finding a hidden gem. That gem in this case is built on unique heroes, exciting boss fights, and endlessly grindable gear to make your build truly your own. Wayfinder initially released as an MMORPG by the minds over at Airship Syndicate. These guys are responsible for Battle Chasers, The Ruined King, and Darksiders fame. Wayfinder sadly got off to an insanely rocky start with huge server stability issues, tons of negative reviews on its free-to-play system, and eventually being dropped by its publisher, citing their need to focus more on their own in-house projects. Despite all of this, Wayfinder made the very bold decision to take the metaphorical guillotine to their MMO strategy and pivot to becoming a self-contained action RPG hero looter that you can play with friends. Not only have all the stability issues completely disappeared, but after changing from a free-to-play for a one-time buy-in model, you can now gather everything available in the game all by yourself with zero additional money spent on microtransactions. The game took a page right out of the Grimdawn handbook and said, I think we're going to be okay without all that soulless monetization. And they were absolutely correct. Souls are very important to have when trying to navigate the expanding abyss of reality. More importantly, Wayfinder has the important systems that are native to mainstay action RPGs. We have skill upgrades, talent trees, gear upgrades, passive upgrades, weapon upgrades, and you can even use transmogs to make your character the prettiest princess in the castle. Tangent aside, Wayfinder has a brilliant art style to captivate the player, flashy and responsive combat to keep you engaged, and enough progression to stretch both of those things well into the wee hours of the night, when all the things bumping around in your closet are getting pretty sick of all the clacking keys and bright blue light. As you play through the game, you'll find new weapons that will permanently change how you approach combat, much like Monster Hunter, but you'll also unlock new characters with different abilities. This means that any character using any weapon can be changed at any point if you want something new to play around. Wayfinder also has its own overworld with instance dungeons that offer plenty of breaks in the grind filled with beautiful new settings. As of this video, Airship Syndicate is still developing Wayfinder and have plans to keep the lights on as long as there are people who are still interested in playing. If you need any more of a barometer on why to play Wayfinder, you can take a look at just how well it's climbing out of its mixed review status to a very positive one. For a $25 buy-in, you'll be hard-pressed to find a more entertaining time. You'll be seeing more of Wayfinder on this broadcast, including character and weapon guides, system tutorials, and all manner of updates to the game as they come out. Speaking of up-and-coming content, there just so happens to be a whole gaggle of heavily armored 8-foot-tall super soldiers charging headfirst into the second week of September. If you weren't aware, there is a grim dark future headed directly for the gaming community at large, and it goes by the name Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2. While details are still incoming for this game, Space Marine 2 promises to have a remarkably cinematic campaign mode led by none other than Lieutenant Titus of the Ultramarines from Space Marine 1. It also comes with a 6v6 competitive mode for all the bloodthirsty ragemongers out there, which will be tactical, team-based, and class-based, and for anyone who's played the original Space Marine and spent any amount of time in the competitive multiplayer of that game, you know this is insanely addictive. It's only Space Marines and Chaos Space Marines at the moment. There are plenty of factions within each to make them feel specifically like yours. Most importantly, it has a 3-player co-op PvE mode in which you'll take on missions to a cluster of worlds fighting back the impending onslaught of the Tyranids and the denizens of Chaos alike. These modes will operate around a class system, so you'll be able to play so many different kinds of Space Marine that you'll never have an opportunity to be bored. Unless, of course, you're a Necron player, in which case, please continue to enjoy your very, very long nap. As it is right now, Space Marine 2 is trickling information out to the public on its gameplay, and we're going to ignore the entire leaked version of the game because I haven't been waiting all these years just to play an unfinished game. When it releases, expect to see an absolutely maniacal amount of content for this game on this broadcast because it will be an experience. Now that we're all hyped out of our minds for the future of gaming, I'd like to talk to you about the past. Specifically, the days gone by when humans put all of their spare change into cabinets dotted by joysticks and brightly colored buttons. When a single quarter bought you a single life, but a dollar bought you an entire storyline. This memory of times since gone brings me back to why I find myself up to my eyes in a library full of roguelite games. Yes, I said light with a T because I'm not a masochist. There's already a whole planet's worth of those, and the space is just too crowded for me in all my glory. Roguelites are games that share a lot with the arcade cabinets of yesteryear, in that you'll play, you'll die, but then you'll grow. That is a roguelite, and that is this feeling so perfectly encapsulated by Skull, the Hero Slayer. Skull is a pixel art 2D side-scrolling roguelite in which our protagonist is a recently deceased skeleton who doesn't do a whole lot of talking. While playing through the game, you'll be introduced to snippets of story explaining what is happening in the world and how Skull came to be where he is. After surpassing each new act of the game, you'll be given cutscenes and dialogue that, while short, packs the emotional punch of the line, "I am Iron Man." What's more is that the story of the game might be a great motivator to continue playing, but the gameplay is so smooth that you'll actually become quickly addicted to just how easy it is to play. Skull has 2 abilities and can swap his skull for that of another skeleton, which also has 2 of its own abilities. Every time that Skull swaps, he also uses a swap ability, meaning that on every playthrough, you'll have access to a total of 6 different abilities for all different kinds of situations. You access these abilities by picking up skulls of dead warriors out in the world and replacing your current one with another that you like. For instance, I might find the Thief's Skull and decide to use gold and stealth as my weapon, separating enemies from their gold while it explodes all around them. Maybe I'd prefer the Werewolf Skull, becoming a being of speed and carnage, dashing all across the battlefield, howling over the bodies of my fallen enemies. These skulls can be upgraded every few levels as well, unlocking new powers and abilities as they become the legendary versions they've always been meant to be. There are so many options, but each of those will fall into a category of speed, balance, or power. Speed skulls are quick with multiple fast dashes, balanced skulls are average dashers with average power, and power skulls are hard-hitting but only have 1 slow armored dash. Since you can equip 2 of them, you have a lot of opportunity to dream up all different kinds of combinations. This gets even better when you add in relics and quintessences. Simply put, relics are passive items that you'll pick up that give you special effects. They combine with each other as well into many other different categories, meaning that they can make or break a run and build dependent on how lucky you are to find the right ones. Quintessences are another activatable ability with a much longer cooldown than your normal skills. They're oftentimes much more explosive though, and can even empty entire maps worth of enemies in a single use. I've been meaning to put Skull on this station for years now, but could never really find the time or courage to commit to it. Well, the time is now, and even if I'm just speaking into the abyss, I'll know that there's at least 2 of us enjoying one of the best games ever made. You'll be seeing all kinds of deep dives into the legendary skulls, build guides for different ways to finish the games, and a couple of tutorials on all different things happening while you're not becoming the best little hero slayer you can be. With all the heroes running for the hills, though, you have to wonder, where is there left to run? Could it be a castle so titanic and full of danger that your entire family line will be required to conquer it? That's certainly a possibility, and I'm kidding, that's exactly Rogue Legacy 2. This game came to me a little bit later than Skull did, but charmed me with its inviting art style, snappy gameplay, and very thought-provoking narrative. You might not realize it at first, but Rogue Legacy 2 has some very deep, dark thought bubbles rising up to the surface. It's obviously trivial for a multi-dimensional consciousness, but for the average gray matter container, I imagine it's quite the revelation. For now, I've given myself a fresh start in Rogue Legacy 2 to relearn all of the mechanics and acclimate to many of its quirks. For those who haven't ever played this game, you'll enter the castle, which will be different every time as the heir of your previous run. Each time you die, your children will attempt the castle using the wealth that you gained previously to purchase upgrades for things like your health or new classes that offer different playstyles. As you level up and gain more classes, gear, spells, and other such adventuring goodies, you'll venture deeper into the castle, finding bigger and badder bosses. These bosses protect different zones and generally impede your progress while being the toughest challenges to overcome. There is also a very significant amount of platforming in certain parts of the game, so some players may find that in between all of the scrapping that there is to do, you might just have to find a creative way to get across some really big holes in the ground, or spikes in the ceiling, or worst of all, floating invincible metal balls that really couldn't give even the slightest concern to where you need to walk. All in all, Rogue Legacy 2 is one of the most highly praised roguelites in the business, and I would be terribly off the mark not to include builds and runs of this in my gallery of roguelites. Now there is one more game that we need to talk about in this genre, and it's a real reality bender. Some of you might be familiar with a game developer by the name of Arc System Works. You may also be familiar with the fact that they have created one of the most beloved fighting games of all time, named Guilty Gear. What you might not be familiar with is that they also developed a spiritual successor to Guilty Gear called BlazBlue. This fighting game was particularly popular for a few years, spawning many of its own releases and sequels before handing the reins back to Guilty Gear in its current form. Now, all of this is to preface the inclusion of BlazBlue Entropy Effect on this channel. Entropy Effect is a roguelite which uses many of the popular characters from the game's universe and turns them into archetypes for us to run through a series of side-scrolling dungeons capped off by large boss monsters. The formula is a bit simple on its face, and much like any other roguelite, Entropy Effect follows the same formula of collecting buffs throughout your run and then translating those buffs into power for your next run. The kicker here is that all of the combo potential of a fighting game and more is available to you as the player. If you're a fan of fighting games, you know that some combos can become downright egregious in length and damage, and while Entropy Effect takes that limiter off and says, hey, your imagination is the limit, go absolutely insane. That inevitably leads to combos that break down into more combos that split off even into more combos, and eventually you become a being of such pure combo creation, any onlookers casually passing by go blind with pure euphoria. There are obviously a lot of other things going on in the background and different points to consider while you're attempting runs of BlazBlue Entropy Effect, but the sheer joy that you'll encounter while unlocking new characters, crushing those combos, and doing it all over and over again will be right up there with the birth of your first child. But the time has come to close the broadcast down for the day. The darkness encroaches, the dreamer awakes, and the ineffable inevitably finds another insane person to torment. I hope you enjoyed this sampler. I know I had a great time making it, and I can't wait to share every single one of these fantastic games with you over the future of the broadcast of WRPG Radio. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, make sure you lock your door at night, because you never know
What'll come knocking?